Jolie, give me a ping once we're live on YouTube. Okay, great. So hello, everyone. I'm Thomas Logan from Equal Entry, and I'm one of the organizers of Accessibility New York City. So today, our meetup is turning 7 years old. So let's all wish Accessibility New York City a happy birthday. I can't believe it's been 7 years here. So really excited to have you all here today, and excited that we have our most number of attendees signed up for an event ever. So we appreciate everyone's interest in our meetup group, and we strive to make sure that every event we have every month is accessible and available. So we want to thank Jolie McPhee, who's been with us from the beginning here too with our events, from the Accessibility Special Interest Group of the Internet Society of New York, who is providing the YouTube stream. And so all of our presentations, we have now over 80 presentations are available on our YouTube page. Today's presentation as well will be available on the YouTube page. And we have had captions and accessible transcripts for every event. And we want to thank also Mirabai Knight, or Steno Knight, here today, who's also been with us from the very beginning in New York City on helping make these events accessible. And so Mirabai Knight provides the captioning that you're seeing either on the live stream or here inside of the Zoom today. So thank you, Mirabai. We also want to thank our sponsors, Adobe, Equal Entry, Fable, and Google. So we have 4 sponsors who help make sure that our events are accessible and available to everyone. And so if you ever have any feedback on how we can make the event more accessible or inclusive, please share that with us. We're always happy to take feedback. And now I want to present our presenter tonight. So Crystal Preston Watson is an accessibility and quality engineer based in Denver, Colorado, and she's a senior digital accessibility analyst at Salesforce. And I got to catch her presentation last year at the Inclusive Design 24 conference, and it was one of my favorites, and really happy to hear this presentation today or tonight, wherever you are in the world. Take it away, Crystal.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm going to share my screen before so make sure that you can see it. Are my slides, are they up and ready? Because
yes, they're coming through. They're coming through. Good.
Okay, good. And then, Thomas, thank you so much. I am extremely happy to be here. I'm super excited, and I'm also very nervous because I'm nervous before any talk that I give, even one that is not completely new to me, but it's like every talk is like I've done it for the first time, no matter how many times I've given it. So, good evening or late afternoon I know there's some people who are joining from the West Coast. This is Broke with Accessible Tastes, Understanding the Economics of Digital Access. And again, I am Crystal Preston Watson. And as Thomas said, I'm a senior digital accessibility analyst at Salesforce. If you want to contact me after this talk with any questions that might pop up, because I know I'm the type of person who will take in a talk and really enjoy it, and then after the fact, after all the questions are said and done, it's over, then have a question. So I am more than happy to answer questions after this. You can reach me via Twitter at Scopic Engineer, LinkedIn, and my website. My website is crystalprestonwatson.com. Twitter and my website's the best way. I do use LinkedIn. I don't really enjoy using LinkedIn, but if you do decide to contact me there, I will get it. It just will probably be a lot more delayed than via Twitter or my website. And so before we get started, I just want to give you a few notes. This presentation is a vast overview of disability and economics. An hour, and actually this talk is 30 minutes because I do want to allow time for roughly 30 minutes. I want to allow time for questions. It can't even touch the surface of all the interconnected issues and complexities surrounding subjects. Also, this particular presentation is focused on the United States and in some cases New York, but disability and accessibility are global issues. And I am planning on doing a updated version of this presentation that has a broader global focus. So this talk kind of came about as I was thinking about shifting left. And for those who may not be familiar with that, the principle of shifting left in software development is bringing tasks that are usually left to the end of the development cycle earlier. And this is done, because to mitigate risk and improve the quality of products and features before they reach the customer. And as someone who has a background in quality engineering, I am thrilled and celebrate to see this come into accessibility. As many of you know, accessibility is usually an afterthought if it's giving any thought at all when it comes to technology and software and website development by many places. And many of the major issues and blockers that we see, we constantly see would just not exist if accessibility was considered at the beginning. But as I started to think more about this, the kind of shift left accessibility, what is the beginning and what should be considered? There is kind of unspoken assumption that I find many companies and organizations have when it comes to accessibility and disabled customers. And that assumption, one of those assumptions is that customers have equal access to technology and assistive tech to use and consume the products. It's kind of like, bear with me, it's a weird analogy, but it's like with the old, like the Star Trek TOS, the original series episodes, like when, like they use transporter, and when they're beamed down to whatever planet of the week, that's only when the story starts. And for a lot of places, when a customer, not just when a customer gets to their products, but has to go out of the way to identify that they are disabled and they need accessibility, settings and features. That's when this accessibility begins. I've been in so many talks, rooms, presentations, meetings, and rarely does initial access by disabled people is it discussed or mentioned. And in my opinion, a significant reason for this is that many people just don't understand the reality of disability outside of technology, their own company's products, particular disabilities, or their own personal income level, or the income level of their peers, or their quote unquote average or common users. And because the thing is that if you don't have this understanding, you don't really, you don't understand, because the more comprehensive glimpse that you have what it means to be disabled in the United States in 2022, the 21st century, you realize that shifting left means not just thinking about like initial design or concept, but the journey that people have to endure before they even use or even know about your products or features. And like everything in this country, that the kind of experience that people have on that journey depends on money. So let's talk about money. The median annual household income for like households that include any working age, and working age is like 21 to 64, though I think that's really nowadays that it's like, it seems like it's like 18 to like whenever you're, whatever, like honestly, like, whatever age, upper limit age. I digress. I'm getting off on a tangent, but you know, any working age people without a disability in the United States in 2018 was $74,400. The median annual income of households that include working age people with a disability in the United States is $46,900. If we want to focus down on New York State, the income with those without disabilities was median, you know, kind of annual household income was $83,100, and with disabilities is $45,600. There is a vast divide between the incomes for those homes with and without disabled individuals. And so let's kind of jump into see and look at the numbers around disability and employment to see why that is. So when it comes to 12% of people with disabilities make up, make up approximately, so people with disabilities make up approximately 12% of the US working age population. However, they account for more than half of those living in long-term poverty. And so 32% of working age people with disabilities in the US are employed, compared with 73% of those without disabilities. And if we want to kind of, again, focus on New York and New York City, 35% of working age people with disabilities in New York were employed versus 74% with those without disabilities. Those are some really, really high numbers of unemployment for people with disabilities. And there are multiple factors for that. But the most significant is really, and this became very clear in 2020, is the resistance from companies to hire disabled workers. And much of that resistance is usually surrounding providing accessible accommodations for workers in accessible environments. But as we saw with the beginning of the pandemic, many of those accessible accommodations that were said to be impossible to provide for disabled workers, accommodations like remote working, were solved for millions of workers almost literally overnight. And it really is kind of just like within and these are huge companies that from where the vast majority of their workforce were in offices or on physical locations, went from that to remote work within again almost overnight, and honestly in some cases for a lot of people overnight. But it just because a disabled person finds work, it doesn't that a job or a company that's willing to provide accessible accommodations, it doesn't always mean that the work will be adequately compensated. And this is kind of something that a lot of people don't really know about. And this is a slide that a lot of people are kind of shocked to once I do explain it. So the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, is the act that establishes minimum wage, overtime pay, a lot of different things, record keeping, employment standards for employees in not just in federal, state, and local governments, but also in the private sector. It's the act that states that the federal minimum wage is $7.25, but it is the federal minimum wage is $7.25. But if you kind of dig deeper into the Fair Labor Act, there's Section 14C, and Section 14C of that act does allow for some employers who seek and get approval and certification to pay less than federal minimum wage, quote, if a worker who has disabilities for the job being performed is one of the whose earning or productive capacity is impaired by a physical or mental disability. So what this is saying is that if employers ask the government to say, hey, we are going to hire people with disabilities, and we feel that their disabilities impedes the labor that we are hiring them to do, but can we pay them less than $7.25 an hour? And this act says, sure, you can. We go ahead. Now, they also, and I should say this section 14C does go on to specify that it doesn't apply unless the disability actually does impair the worker's earnings or productive capacity for the work being performed. So it's not a blanket thing. It's like, if you have a disability, we can pay you less than minimum wage. But it's really, especially when we kind of see how places and companies and organizations really start to view people with disability, it's one of these things that can be misused and has been misused. And there's a lot of court cases and reports that have been done about it, because there is a misconception that just if you have a disability, just stop, that people with disabilities are less productive, low skilled, and unskilled. And this is just really, it is a misconception. It is a myth. I wanted, one of the jobs that that kind of usually may fall into this section 14C are grocery baggers that you see at grocery stores. And, they sometimes are contracted by chains from different organizations that will hire people with disabilities, and they will pay them supplemental wage. And the thing is that this, a skill is a skill. It isn't, work is work. I'll be honest, you do not want me trying to bag your groceries, because you are going to get busted up eggs. And then, because I do not know how to do that. I am someone who people would say I am high skilled. And the thing is that, for me, trying to, there's a lot of things that, I am not, my skill does not compare to someone else's. So it's not, and doesn't matter what, disability or impairment that, I have. As a skill is a skill, work is work, work is work. Just kind of, I'm getting off on a tangent, but this is kind of when I found out about this particular section, it really did just ignite kind of a fiery anger in me, as you can kind of see as I get kind of discombobulated as I speak. But a good thing is that there are some states that have started to eliminate the subminimum wages in the areas. So several states have passed bills to phase out the payment of subminimum wages under Section 14C. And those states include, Alaska, Maine, Maryland, New Hampshire, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, Colorado, California, and Delaware. New York, I actually tried to find out, there is a bill, it's in the state Senate right now. It's been there since May 14th of last year. It hasn't really moved. And before that, before it even got before the Senate, it was also kind of like in this weird kind of holding status. I don't know a whole lot about the kind of state legislation in New York to say what that means for it. Will it be passed or will it not? Just know if you are in New York, there is a bill that's currently before the state procurement and contracts committee about eliminating subminimum wages in New York. So we're kind of talking about disability and employment, and this eliminating subminimum wages is one really a good trend to see. But the thing is that there are many people whose disabilities prevent them from working full-time, part-time, or even at all. And for those people, that means they'll have to seek other benefits and other income, ways to provide for themselves. And in the United States, that really does mean Social Security, so Supplemental Social Income, SSI, and Social Security Disability, SSDI. A lot of people may have heard of these two, and I realize that if you're, especially if you are someone, if you're disabled yourself, you have, family members, friends, loved ones that are disabled, and, you might have heard of the trials and tribulations they have to go through to get these benefits. And these benefits are really, they're kind of cash assistance. And I'm trying not too much to read from it, but it really, it's one of these things of I didn't want to get too deep into SSI and SSDI because one, I could make a whole presentation, hours long, really digging into disability in the United States and what it means to try to get benefits and live off of this. And so it is a very complicated issue. And so I am doing, again, I'm not even barely making the scratch. I'm just kind of giving you information about it, but it is worth going through and kind of just reading even the quick facts on the Social Security Administration's website about what really goes into these two programs. But kind of just a big overview is that SSI is for people, people with disabilities who are blind, who are older, to have, they will get a payment from the government, the Social Security Administration every month that will provide them income. SSDI is along the same lines, but you actually pay into that to that particular program. As a worker, you get kind of credits. And let's just I'm just going to go through, and I'm not going to spend too much into this because it is a lot. There's a lot around these two programs. But so when we talk about SSI, to be eligible for SSI in the United States, you either have to be age 65 or older. You have to be considered either like blind or disabled, and you have to have limited income, limited resources. If you are a U.S. citizen or a national, it really, that also, depending on what your status is, that makes a huge difference. And also, if you're residents of the 50 states, and also some kind of outlying territories. There are also many territories of the U.S. that where citizens are considered kind of naturalized citizens, but they're not available for SSI. Sorry about that. And there's a lot more that gets into it. I'm not going to read all this because again, this is something, we're not here for me to give you a super fast, like a super detailed, dive into SSI and SSDI, but I do want you to understand a lot of what goes into when someone is told that, hey, well, if you have a disability, you can just go on, SSI or SSDI. It's quick, this is, cut and dry. That's what happened. There's a lot that goes into it. Let's just kind of go over to SSDI. Again, this seems a little bit, not as, many kind of points into becoming eligible. But, the main thing is that with SSDI, you're not eligible for it if you haven't had a employment that has gained you credits into this. So, and that's so the last point in this slide is that generally the person would have accumulated 20 Social Security credits in the last 10 years prior to the onset of disability, normally 4 credits per full or partial year. 1 additional credit is required for every year by which the worker ages exceeds 42. So that's kind of the difference between SSI and SSDI, because I think sometimes they're confused as the same thing. They are different programs. Now, if we're going to, when I don't want to, again, I don't want to this to be seen as that, this is a easy thing to get. And there is a huge misconception that these programs are, if you don't want to work, you can just get these, benefits. I did omit a slide, actually several slides that went into deeper on how the process and what the years that it can take. And it really can be years to get these benefits. And you don't get these benefits, now you might be able, if you are awarded these benefits, you can get payment retroactively, but until you are, there isn't a decision made, you don't get anything. So if you are, disabled and you have to live, but you're waiting for these benefits, you have to, there's not a lot you can do. And, one of the things is, and stories that come, being someone who's had, many people in their life who have to go through the process of getting these benefits, it can be, without having a lawyer going through yourself with these benefits, like trying to, filling out all this paper, it's a very difficult, very, very difficult process to do on your own, especially dealing with, your disability and other kind of just factors in life. But say, you do get benefit, you're awarded it. This, you get there is a cap. There isn't just, they don't, they just don't start throwing money at you and be like, every of your required needs are taken care of. There is there's a set level of income that you get. So for SSI, for supplemental security income, it's $794 for an individual and around around $1,100 for a couple who are filing for SSI jointly. And for SSDI, the average monthly benefit is around $1,200. Actually, I did see that it was increased for 2022, but I couldn't verify it before I jumped on. I was to this presentation, but that increase that I saw was about around like $75 to $100 for an individual. And so also with, if you do take on SSI, you can only have a certain amount of resources, financial resources available to you. And now there is a lot of caveats to this, especially when it comes to if you are also working with, while you're getting SSI or SSDI, there can, if you're certain costs like that maybe are due to work or, like the employment will come into play, but there's also, the more you work, the more your income is reduced through SSI. So at the, end of the day, and depending on how much you're making, it's a very fine balancing act. So, and when we look at resources, there's around $2,000 is the, so if you have more than that in like savings accounts, other sorts of assets, that's when the Social Security Administration starts to take a look and starts to see, well, okay, what does that mean? And it really can affect how much benefits you get. And it's $3,000 for a couple who's filing jointly. And for SSDI, there is no resource limits because of the way that program is set up. Now, you might kind of look at this, especially when it comes to that number for $3,000 for a couple, and kind of think that's really low. Someone who's married and or are in legal like union, and be like, okay, well, that's not a lot, when you're trying to, and especially not a lot when you're a couple that both are dealing with disability. You have, probably tons of, you don't even have to have tons of expensive, you can have one hospital bill and one healthcare bill, and it's a lot, it just takes one, really. And so this is the thing, and something that you might have heard people talk about. There really is, if you are someone who has a disability and you are, you're a couple, if you are a couple and you are both applying for, for Social Security, benefits, you are going to receive up to 25% less than if you are living, if you're living together but not married. So when people say there is a marriage tax on disabled people, this is what they mean. So it's pretty much saying, if you're disabled and you're both disabled and you are living together, you are, that means, we're just going to give you less. Or even if only, one of you is getting benefits, it says, okay, well, this means, you're married, that other person can take, makes enough that'll, their income will cover you. And that's really not it. And so that's why it's saying to a lot of people that, okay, it really dictates their intimate relationships. And it's saying, well, if you want to get married, but but you have a disability, you may not be able to do that because you can't. You might not be able to support yourself, and your partner. So really, let's just say after this, we've talked about employment, we've talked about benefits, and let's just say a disabled person is has either attained a job that will allow them some disposable income, or they've found a way to make their benefits work so they can have some semblance of a good again, just a semblance of kind of a consistent income. There's still a lot more to be overcome. And this is really where we start to get into a lot of a huger issue. And that bigger issue is the digital divide. And so the digital divide really kind of approaches upon like what access to really, when you hear it, it's really mostly in connection with access to internet and broadband. And it's something that is a huge concern because really, a lot of times, like there's assumption when it comes to tech, especially tech companies and organizations, that everyone has this just kind of, again, everyone has the internet, everyone's online, and everyone's online in the, in the same way, but that's really just not the case. According to Broadband Now, which is an advocacy group, that's really concerned about broadband and internet access in the United States, estimated 42 million Americans do not have broadband access. And this is including things like DSL, fiber cable, all, kind of, and wireless. This is something, and I will, on Twitter, I will link to this. If you follow me, I will provide the slides for this talk later on, and also put some, some access to some of the resources I cite here on my Twitter account right away. Is that there is, like, the FCC has, according to Broadband Now, kind of reported the access to broadband. And so for the FCC, they're saying like, well, only around 42 million, 14 million people don't have access. But there was this report really goes into, well, that's really where part of the way they came out to only 14 is that if one particular household had access to some kind of internet, that said, that was considered access to everyone that was nearby, which is really not the same. And this is the thing is that when you really, internet access and broadband access is a huge issue. Well, for, if you're in, digital accessibility, because if you don't really have, if you don't have the internet, you don't have access to the internet, then you really don't have access to any technology. And also when it comes to digital, kind of the digital divide when it comes to broadband, there's usually the case where it's like, well, if, mainly this is about rural versus urban, and that it is true that if you are people in rural areas do have less access to broadband. It's something as someone who is a quality engineer that has come up, and I, in testing for certain customers and stuff like that. It's a huge thing. But there's also a huge issue with the lack of broadband access, internet access in urban places as well. It's not just a rural versus urban issue. It's really a widespread issue, and it really can go. And as I said, it can be not just by one geographical area versus another, but block by block, and even neighborhood by neighborhood. Let's take a look at New York. So here I actually found a report that's talking about broadband in New York State, and this table has it broken down by New York State regions. And again, so you have North County, that has around 162,000, households, and it has households without broadband access is 31,387. And the share of households without broadband access is 19.3%. And it goes and it breaks it up. And as it really does, Mohawk Valley, 194,408 total households. And then there's around 35,000 households without broadband access, which is around 18.2%. But the thing is that the report by the New York State Comptroller found is that almost half of the households without broadband access are in New York City. And so they go on to say that while the FCC reported only 0.4% of New York City residents, or approximately 31,000 do not have broadband available, more than 513,800 households without access. And so the thing is that in New York City, yes, like in New York State, like outside of New York City, a lot of places in New York State are considered rural, and there is a issue with the lack of access to broadband. But in New York City, there accounts for almost half of the people in New York State that don't have access to broadband. So it's, and the thing is that there are, so if you are just, if you are a disabled individual who lives, it really doesn't matter if you live in in upper New York State or in in New York City, if you will probably have issues gaining access to, just even reliable internet, depending on where you are. And so let's go, on. So, knowing this, now, let's say, okay, well, you get access to somewhat reliable internet. And cool. And so, and you have, maybe you've, you've gotten access to a computer as, and you are looking to, now you want to acquire some assistive technology. So with this, we're going, but that really, now the problem is like really acquire, like, what does that really mean? And how much is that going to cost you? So right here, this is a slide, and this slide's called Screen Reader Price Comparison. And it's a comparison for me. And this, on the slide, I have JAWS, VoiceOver, and NDVA. And all three of these are screen reader software. So on this, like, for me, so just for me as I don't qualify for any sort of program that would make JAWS like free or reduced. So that means either I would have to pay a subscription of $95 a year or $1,000 outright for perpetual. But it also includes, there's a quotation of, in parentheses, there's $1,500. That $1,500 is the price of my PC that I would use JAWS for. VoiceOver, which is Mac, and so I should say JAWS is Windows only, and the $1,500 is a PC that runs Windows. VoiceOver, while it's free because it's built into a Mac OS, it is to get the price of a Mac, depending on if it's used or new, can vary from and I was looking at what a kind of used I looked at a 2017, kind of refurbished Mac that was around $900. And so in this parentheses, you see $2,099. That is what my Mac that I'm using right now costs. I just bought that last year. It's a 2019 model. So while VoiceOver is technically free, the cost is anywhere from between, like, say, $900 to a great deal more, depending on the newer 2021. I don't know if the 2022 version of MacBook Pro is coming out. And then you have NDVA, and NDVA is also a Windows only screen reader. It is open, I don't know if it's open source, but it is free. They do accept donations. And in the parentheses, I have $1,500 because, again, that's the price of my PC. I do have NDVA on my PC, and that's what I use. I actually don't use JAWS. I do have JAWS on work computer, but in my everyday kind of computing, gaming, and stuff like that, when I'm on my PC, I use NDVA. And the thing is that there are assumptions that it is very, assistive technology is something that is just given to people with disabilities. And that really is not true. One thing assumed that, your insurance will pay for it. And I did omit the let's talk about insurance when it comes to assistive technology, because it really became, let's just talk about that for the whole time. It is not something that is guaranteed. There's also a lot of if you are a student, you can get due to Section 504 and accommodations, with schools. And that is, depending, there's a lot to that. It's not just we've said, you are a student with disabilities. Now, we'll give you assistive technology. And it's not just cut and dry like that. So there are many different ways. And this slide is 10 ways. And it's a slide that I found from Western University, and Andrew Libs, and really, 10 ways that, someone could go about getting assistive technology purchases. There are mandated programs, government programs, regional disability organizations, national education programs, and disability foundations and nonprofits, employers, assistive technology loan programs, manufacturer purchase and lease programs, fraternal organizations, and loaners and buying use. Very few of these, are one, guaranteed to provide someone with disabilities a assistive technology, or for free, and then really can do a lot at all. There's still a cost connected to it, and depending what type of assistive technology is needed, it could be a great deal of a cost. I'm fortunate that that I have a job that allows me to not really think about when it comes to, but even with like jobs, I really though I could put that money into that and get that and do $95 for a year, like for a subscription, or 1,000 outright. I haven't done that, and it's still, though I can afford it, it's still not a light purchase. And someone who, depending on what they do, what type of job and their income, it is something that's insurmountable for them, potentially. And the one thing I would like to think about. Yes, we're getting to.
Yeah, come on, like we're about 10 minutes.
Oh yes, I'm almost done. Yes, there's a lot of information, and I want to, and I just have a few more slides left. One of the things is that when we talk about assistive technology, one of the most widely used assistive technology devices is mouth and head sticks, and that's because of their low cost. And this is something that really doesn't come in in those conversations of like, well, we're going to support assistive technology. Again, it's really about like, well, there's the consideration of we're going to support assistive technology in the form of software or actual hardware devices. But what happens when due to the type of disability someone has, and also the money that the income that they have, a lot of them are like, well, couldn't they use an eye tracking and things like that? Well, they may not be able to, afford that because it's not going to be provided by insurance, and it's not going to be provided to them through, a program. They may not, it may take a while for them to get it, and it may not appear at all. And so kind of rounding out this, say, let's, someone has they have the computer, they have assistive technology, so they're all set. And just a few things I wanted to think about. That doesn't mean they're going to get access, and this is because of something that's really big in companies that are focused on U.S. markets, is the Windows versus Mac versus Chrome, and kind of like what is being supported. There's a really big focus for a lot of places to focus on when it comes to now when you're talking about desktops, you usually do get a big you do get a focus when it comes to support. It's usually not super unequal when it comes to supporting maybe Windows versus Mac. But when we get outside of the United States and what's the leading, actual, operating systems, it's a really surprising thing. When you talk about, so Q4 of 2020, Windows had around 76.7% of the world kind of like shipped out, like, kind of market share. Mac OS was 7.7%. And new kind of especially around with the pandemic and with the support of schools, is Chrome OS. And Chrome OS actually shipped out at the end of 2020 it was around like 14% of of devices that use Chrome. And something, if you know me, when it comes to iOS and Android, when it comes to tech in the United States, iOS is something that's really, 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 really supported. And Android is kind of, by a lot of places is kind of like, we'll do it after the fact. It's not an MVP. And it's really kind of, but it strikes me as one really shocking, because especially when it's like, well, we're a global, place, and we want to, we have a global reach. But if you only have you really only put your focus in iOS, designing for iOS, support, only having iOS apps, you are really ignoring the rest of the world. And, because marketing share Q3 2021, when it came to shipping out devices, iOS was only 16.2%. Android make the vast majority of that with 83.8%. So, and especially if you are someone that, can't afford iPhone prices, you are someone who actually maybe who have family in, say, like in a different country where you talk a lot and you have, you decide to get an Android, if your focus when it comes to accessibility is really a focus on, well, them having, say, Apple or iOS or Apple or iOS devices, which is something I definitely have seen, you are really excluding a good number of people. So I know I'm going to wrap this up so we can get quick. And I know there's a lot in this. So I just want to say, there's a lot of, let me go back to this, so this assumption, it's an assumption, and it is a falsehood. There is unequal access to technology and assistive devices. And it's really, the journey to this is very different, is vastly different. And it's something that needs to be considered, because if you're really going to provide accessibility to your customers and your users, you really do need to understand how they get to your products, to your site, your application, and really understand that they're not, not everyone's coming up with the latest devices, the latest and updated, assistive technology that is available, and or the costless. I'm going to stop that right now, because that's a good place to stop if I can't pronounce things. So here we are. I am so sorry. That took so much. I said I was going to end up in 30 minutes, and I talked so much.
No, this is amazing. Thank you so much, Crystal. I think, definitely listening to your presentation, especially in the SSI section, I feel like it's come up tangentially many times at our meetup in person. We've definitely never had this kind of comprehensive presentation about this topic. And in the chat today, there was quite a lot of interesting commentary, which I'll also save out to provide with you. And as mentioned here, Crystal's very open to being contacted. So we're going to take 10 minutes here to go through some of the questions. I'm not sure we'll be able to get to all of them, but please feel free to follow up in other channels as well. So again, thank you so much. I'm going to dive right into the first question for you, Crystal. We had a question from, let's see, sorry, back here. We had a question on the statistics from Catriel. Is there any disabilities using the SSDI definition? Who is doing the disability measurement? Is it using the ADA for measuring those statistics of people that have access to SSDI?
I'm going to, with that I'm not going to even try to pretend like I have a definite answer to that. Usually, and it seems to me a lot of times with SSDI, and again, please fact check me, and be like, I'm wrong. That seems to be where, a lot of times with especially workers and people who become disabled, who have usually, had jobs and things like that. And it usually does fall in, there are particular, guidelines of how that you usually do have to go to a doctor, and to get, that documented and given to the Social Security Administration because there, you can't just say, well, you can't just go to and say I am disabled. They want that that evidence. And then even with that, even if you're, say, someone who does have a documented disability, it can also depend on, well, again, and I know this sounds, kind of crass, well, how serious is the disability? disability. There's a lot of things that come into play, and that those definitions, I don't have it at the top of my head. There's a lot of digging into, again, that's its own, it's its own talk.
Great, yes, agreed. So there's several questions related to FLSA and
yes.
So for the, there's questions on the, from Laura, are the filings and approvals for the certificates publicly available?
I do not know if they are publicly available. That is a good question. I can also, and that's something I can go ahead and look at. Like, so I don't know that, I don't know that off the top of, off hand, but it's, usually like a lot of, kind of, organizations that, talk about getting, disabled workers into employment. A lot of times they have, they work with companies, and usually the companies they work with usually do have those type of, kind of credentials to and exemptions, or, for when it comes to Section 14C of the EFSA. SLA, so many different acronyms.
Nailing this all up, so we're jumbled. I think also related to FLSA, and so David, if you want to clarify this, but I think this is related to the also getting the application to approved, but how do they gauge that? Is it based on productivity? Is it arbitrary? I think just like any information on like which ones get approved and not approved.
Again, that's, I don't have that offhand, and a lot of that is, and that's the thing, is that, it's one of those, it's one of those processes that I don't know, but considering that you're starting to get states that are saying this is just not, we're eliminating this, it seems like it is something that gets misused in how that is, is assessed. So, again, I don't have that, again, these are a lot of the stuff. It's a lot of, this is not, my main thing, it's a lot of this is like digging deep into a lot of this, kind of data. And though I love digging into data, it's it would take on a full job finding a lot of stuff out.
Yeah, and I definitely do want to say appreciate the attention to the New York bill. That's something that we've always been interested in, the New York City meetup, to educate people about that. So knowing that that bill is actually still in the discussion phase, that's something that it's great for us to know. And as you said, there's, I'm sure, tons of details just on that specific bill itself, let alone the different states that have successfully gotten rid of these things. But very helpful to learn about that today. So next question was related to the there was basically the commentary of the numbers they put in for SSDI and how they come up with those numbers, and the legislation they were put in place many years ago versus now, and how they stay updated. And
yeah, it's one of those things of and I'm going to say I did if some of you follow me on Twitter, where I had issues trying to find updated information, and that's the thing where I am going to provide these slides, and I just need to, because trying to find updated information on this stuff is, it's not the easiest, thing to do. And, when it comes to, and that's the reason why I went, especially when it comes to applying for benefits and things like that, just even finding out, like what you are eligible for, it really takes a lot of digging. And just to think about, a lot of people are doing this on their own, having to navigate this. And, really, for a lot, and this is something I've done years ago where, a lot of people, where it's, a lot of people do suggest who have gone through it to have legal kind of representation. Well, that is going to that takes money, but it does lessen the initial kind of pain points and the time spent doing this. But that's how complicated this thing is, and a lot of people do this on their own. So that means a lot of people do get denied again, and then have to go through again and a lot of that denial is because of they feel things out wrong, or they didn't, like where they might have read a particular ability point wrong. It's really it takes a lot having to deal and find out this information. And as you can see, as I'm as I struggle with answer these, where because a lot of this stuff is buried deeper than like just going to a site and just clicking a few links.
Yeah, and I've definitely heard from people I know personally and people that have come to the meetup, there's always this fear of like, it is so difficult to make sure you get approved, that if you did start getting successful, making, improving salary things, you get out of access to the service. You have the concern that, well, if I need it again, am I going to be able to get the program or assistance again, because it was so difficult to get set up in the first place. So I've definitely heard that from some of the people who've come here. I want to end with the last question we'll take is, there's a question from Charlotte on the broadband statistics you shared, and wanted confirmation if you knew if this took into account access to a smartphone, like 42 million that don't have.
Yes, I believe so. And I will actually, I'm going to put that link up on my, can I do this really quick? Let me link. I will put it on my Twitter page, but it does, I will link to that Broadband Now report and their findings and how they came up with that, with those numbers. But it didn't just take into consideration of just just kind of like DSL and stuff. It did take into kind of all aspects of kind of internet access as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Crystal. Again, we want to all say thank you. There's tons of things in the chat saying thank you. It's everyone really learned a lot from the presentation. The YouTube stream also has nice things to say. So thank you so much for the presentation today. And we will also be sharing the link. So in addition to pointing to your Twitter and to the presentation, we'll be doing a recap of your presentation, including the links you mentioned as well. So thank you very much. We want to again thank everyone for coming today or tonight to today's presentation. We always strive to have new ideas, and we have our next presentation coming up February 2nd. We'll be having someone from the Google Project Relate team talking about speech recognition for people with speech disabilities, or different types of voices that might not have been trained to some of the traditional voice recognition algorithms. We want to again thank our sponsors, Adobe, Equal Entry, Fable, and Google for helping us provide this event. Thank you to Jolie McPhee from the Internet Society, and thank you to Mirabai Knight, Steno Knight, for the captions today. We really appreciate having you all, and we hope to see you at another event. Have a great day or afternoon. Thank you.